On the next Probably True Solar Stories, we bring you a novella-sized audio version of The Solar Heist, or How I Got Into the Solar Business. If you're new to the Probably True Solar Stories podcast, The Solar Heist is an ongoing storyline about the relationship between a thief and a utility solar developer. There have been lots of twists and turns throughout this series, so for those of you who like a long-form audiobook without the cliffhangers, then this nearly 2-hour episode is for you. The Solar Heist will continue in Season 3 of Probably True Solar Stories, as well as some standalone solar stories. But our solar muses are still working on those episodes. Don't forget to check out the true solar takeaways in the show notes. That's in every episode. That'll separate the solar facts from the solar fiction. And now, here's all 6 chapters of The Solar Heist, or How I Got Into the Solar Business. Written and read by Tor Solar Fred Valenza. Here we go.
La 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 la, oh, oh, la 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 la.
Part 1. The Proposal. How did I get into the solar business? It started with a heist, which led to more trouble, but then to an opportunity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, I didn't know anything about solar or inverters or racking or solar politics. Nothing. I was an independent contractor, as they say. Kind of a referral business. People who knew me knew that I could get things at a discount. And sometimes they had a friend that needed X, Y, or Z at a discounted price. Could I get X, Y, or Z at a certain price? I'd check out my logistics. I'd make a plan, get my guys, and make things happen. The next day, goods are delivered. We shake hands, and I get a cash paycheck for on-time delivery at the agreed-to price. Next job. That was my life before solar. It was simple. Nobody got hurt, and I made a good living. You make a good living, you buy a good house in a respectable neighborhood with respectable neighbors. And that's when I met Charlie. It was very subtle, and I certainly never mixed business with my neighbors. As far as they knew, I was in the independent moving and hauling business. I did some Bitcoin trading on the side. I kept my trucks parked in a lot in West Oakland near the docks, so there was never any big, ugly 18-footers or vans parked in my driveway. I mean, this wasn't Staten Island. Everybody's got a small truck or two parked in their driveways in Staten Island. But now I was living in Rockridge. You have to have a nice green, empty front yard with drought-resistant perennials or whatever in Rockridge. Otherwise, people start to ask questions. And that's exactly what happened. Charlie asked me a question. To me, he was my solar neighbor, the guy that had solar panels on his roof. Like I said, I didn't care about solar then. I cared about coffee, though. Still do. And that's where I saw him. One Saturday morning, Charlie was at Phil's Coffee getting a Java fix. Turns out we both liked strong black coffee. We had more in common, but I'll get to that. I'd seen Charlie and his wife around, but that's it. You know, wave at the front door, say hello walking by. But we never had a conversation until I walked into Phil's that spring Saturday morning. Charlie was sitting at a table drinking his black coffee. Our eyes met, so I couldn't pretend I didn't see him. I was about to do the old wave and leave, but then he gets me. He asks the question that I have to answer. "What's your name again?" asked Charlie, smiling at me with his nice neighbor smile. "Well, I've got a dozen names, and I could buy a dozen more. But this is my neighbor across the street." I couldn't say none of your business. That wouldn't be neighborly. That might lead to more questions, so I had to answer. And I had to use the name that was on the deed of my house, or he might check it out one day and ask me more nosy questions. That wouldn't be good. That would be trouble for both of us. "Massimo," I said. "Massimo Botticelli. But most people call me Mazz." "Botticelli? Like the artist?" "Yep, no relation. But I'm pretty good at painting houses." He laughed. "I'm Charlie. Charlie Boston. Join me?" Charlie indicated the chair across from him. If it weren't Saturday, I'd have said I had to get to work. But legit business people in Rockridge don't work on Saturday. They mow the lawn on Saturday. They grab a cup of coffee. They relax. So I relaxed and pulled up a chair. Neighborly. Normal. Charlie raised his paper cup of steaming hot fills. Cheers to strong black coffee. My Beth calls it sludge. Same with my Pauline, I said. She doesn't get how this bitter, hot darkness can taste so smooth, so nutty, so good. We were both having a normal conversation. I could do that, and I thought I'd get back to Pauline and continue our Saturday in peace. But then Charlie continued. I'm in the solar business, he said. So your company installed on your house? Oh, no. Residential solar is a very different side of the business. I'm on the big utility side. My company develops big solar farms and can have 100,000 solar panels or more in the desert, or on farmland, or anywhere that's close to a transmission tower. Then we sell that clean solar power to utilities and independent power producers at a few cents per kilowatt hour. It's a 30-year contract, so the more solar power we generate, the more money the project owners make. Plus, we're also helping to save the world from climate change. Huh, I said. Sounds like a good living. I could tell Charlie was telling me about his work for a reason, not just new neighbor chit-chat. Well, I do okay. It's the project owners that make millions in revenue, plus get tax benefits. There's a 30% investment tax credit, accelerated depreciation, renewable energy credits, and other incentives. It's a good business, but there can be problems. That's what I'm dealing with right now. A lot of complicated problems. Here we go. I paused. I could have looked at my watch and made for the door, but I didn't. I needed to see where this was going. What kind of complicated problems, I asked. Was he looking for investors? I might be into that, but I didn't think that was it. Well, politics is one complication. Energy is very political. Think about oil in the Middle East and now Ukraine. Same thing with solar, except instead of the Middle East or Russia, solar is now about China. I have to deal with import tariffs, supply chain issues, measuring carbon emissions, and the latest is a new forced labor law. Heard about that, Mazz? It's been in the news. I don't read the news much, I said. Well, this forced labor law, it's one of my big complications right now. Congress passed a law that says you can't import anything that was manufactured with forced labor, which all solar developers like me support. Nobody wants to build a project with solar panels manufactured with slave labor. But how do you know your panels and their entire supply chain are built with regular paid workers? Beats me. I'll tell you, you have to hire people to inspect the factory and all the suppliers, which I do. Then your shipment goes to the exporting company. And now I just heard that my exporter screwed me. They switched our clean, ethically manufactured solar panels with panels made by forced labor. So that's what I've been dealing with since last night. Charlie indicated his phone. They'd just arrived here in Oakland, and customs confiscated them. So now, I'm hoping this strong cup of coffee is going to stimulate ideas for how to replace those panels and to get my solar project moving again. Charlie looked at me. Sorry to hear about that. Doesn't insurance cover something like that? No, international lawyers might take care of it, but it's going to take a long time to prove the panels got switched. I have the purchase orders and all the proof, but it's China. I'm going to be stuck fighting this for a couple of months, at least. Maybe a year. I said. Go on, Charlie. What's the ask? Spill it already. Charlie waited for me to comment beyond the but I didn't. Finally, he continued. You know what happens to those unethical panels, Mazz? I shook my head. Nothing. Right now, they're sitting in some government warehouse in the port of Oakland. Eventually, they'll be sent to the dump, which is bad for the environment. They're probably good quality panels, too, except for the forced labor part. Know what I mean? And there it was. This was a business proposition. Except I wondered how Charlie knew I was in that kind of business. No, I really don't know what you mean. I'm in the trucking business. Right, I know. He looked at me. I kept cool. I don't think I ever mentioned that, Charlie. This is the first time we've ever talked. How do you know? I know because I saw you in your trucking business. That is, I was at the port of Oakland the other day. Or really, I should say last night. Technically, it was this morning at around 2 a.m. I was trying to convince a certain Customs and Border Protection person on duty to give me a break about my solar panel mix-up. I said that I would make sure those solar panels would get properly recycled instead of going to the dump. He just had to release them to me. So we had a very profitable and reasonable conversation, except he said that I needed special authorized transportation for him to release the panels for recycling. What's special authorized transportation? I asked. Well, I think you are, Mazz, because my customs friend pointed to someone getting into a truck about a block away, and I'm pretty sure it was you. Not positive, but I've waved to you enough times across the street to know my neighbor when I see him a block away. Plus, he gave me your name, which wasn't Massimo Botticelli. But I don't care about that. So what? So I'm looking for special authorized transportation, Mazz. Can you help me? Will you help me? I thought about buying Charlie another cup of coffee and putting in some specially authorized rat poison instead of sugar. This is awkward, I said. Is it? Said Charlie. We don't need to be friends, Mazz. We don't need to suddenly sell our homes or do anything awkward. This is a huge solar project. It will replace the energy of an entire coal plant, and it will create hundreds of jobs and make a lot of money and clean energy after it's built. We just need to discuss your fees and the location of my shipping containers. You know your business, I know my business, and I don't want to know anything more. I thought about it. Charlie was right. Special authorized transportation was my business. Charlie didn't care if it was legal or about forced labor or anything except getting his solar project built. And that was fine with me. When? As soon as possible. What's going to happen with your exporter? I asked. Oh gosh, I can't say. You're not going to get your money back? Oh gosh, I can't say, Charlie repeated. We both looked at our dark black cups of coffee. I needed to think. I needed to work out logistics, labor, contingencies, and fees. Write down your number, I said. I handed Charlie my paper napkin. Can't I just text you? I mean, we are neighbors. Normally I use burner phones, but Charlie was right again. We were neighbors. Neighbors text each other all the time. Nothing has to be in the text except call me, neighbor, or let's go for a cup of coffee. True, Charlie. True. I texted him my number. Welcome to the solar business, Charlie said, confirming he'd received my text. If anyone asks, you're doing what solar people call procurement. You're sourcing and delivering solar modules for my project. You have these procurement problems often, Charlie? Solar's like any business, Mazz. We have employee challenges, political challenges, technical challenges, and competition challenges with each other, gas companies and wind companies. But it's also a new industry. So people like me have to be creative about finding solutions. Today, you're one of my creative solutions, Mazz. Maybe there will be future problems you can help with. You never know. I stood up. We walked to our street together in silence. I'll text you. Charlie raised his cup of coffee, smiled, and walked across the street. I watched him. Just another Saturday for Charlie. Not for me. In my business, everything always has to go right. It has to be perfect. Because if it's not perfect, 4 things can happen. Number 1, someone can get arrested. Number 2, someone can die or get injured. Number 3, you can waste a lot of time and money. And number 4, all those things can happen. In the case of my first job in the solar industry, lucky me. I got door number 4. Part 2. The no-good rotten heist. My original plan was very solid and very easy. The solar panels were being stored in a Port of Oakland warehouse that was guarded and monitored by U.S. Customs and Border Control officers and their very trained dogs. Both the dogs and the CPB officers are actually very sweet when they're off duty. When on duty, they will bite, they will shoot, and they will hurt. Fortunately, I knew Max the man and Max the dog. Max the man was a CPB officer who had a passion for consuming and selling a certain kind of organic mushroom that I happened to cultivate in my basement. Max the dog was a CPB German Shepherd who had a passion for peanut butter dog treats that I bought from Costco. So both Maxes liked me and benefited from our friendship. The plan was simple. Max the man would take care of the paperwork. He would also make sure that Max the dog didn't care about me and my 3 associates wearing oddly fitting U.S. Customs uniforms that smelled a lot like Max the man. Max the man scheduled Charlie's solar panels to be transferred on the following Friday night. And by transfer, that meant 4 trucks transferring the modules to an industrial shredder that was owned by CPB, whereupon the solar panels would be turned into industrial confetti. The shards would then be transferred forthwith to the nearest landfill. As long as Max the man's paperwork said that Charlie's panels had been sliced and diced, then Charlie's solar panels no longer existed, at least as far as U.S. Customs were concerned. Everything was set up on my side, but I was worried about the merchandise. I talked to Charlie. What if your panels are a piece of shit, like defective, not like you can fill out your warranty and get them replaced? I'm not worried about it, said Charlie. These solar modules are what the industry calls Tier 1 and bankable. And what I mean by that is banks and investors only fund loans and invest in solar projects that use top-quality panels from a very short list of 20 or 30 vetted solar manufacturers. Clearly, some of the manufacturers on that list had good and bad factories that used forced labor. I tried to do the right thing and get the good ones, but I'm not going to hold up my project for 6 months to go bankrupt for somebody else's corruption. Besides, those panels are more of an environmental problem in the dump than being used. Any more questions? No, I'm just making sure this is worth the risk. I'm not going to do it again. It is, Mazz. Trust me, I have to do this. Okay, and we're set for next Friday. Me and my 3 associates are going to pick up the 4 truckloads of modules and bring them to the shredding facility. Except they won't actually be going to the shredding facility. Instead, they're going to go to your warehouse. I'm assuming you have a warehouse? I'll text you the address. Charlie and I shook hands. He accepted my fees and terms without even bargaining. So far, so good. And then it wasn't so good.
Oh, la 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 la. Oh, oh, la 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 la.
The next Friday, my team saddled up 4 18-wheeler trucks with U.S. Customs markings. Then we changed into Max the man's gently used CPB uniforms. What we didn't have were CPB identification cards. It seemed redundant. We were wearing uniforms and driving trucks with government plates. Why would anybody stop us? At 10 p.m., Max the man and Max the dog met us at the U.S. Customs warehouse where Charlie's shipment of solar panels were waiting for us. I took out my treats for Max the dog and exited my rig. When Max the dog saw me step onto the cement, he headed toward me. It was a slow creep, and then he started building up speed. Then it looked like a gallop. He was fast, like a launched torpedo heading for a direct hit. I froze and looked up to Max the man. This happened with every job. I think Max the man liked seeing how close Max the dog could get to me before giving his A-OK whistle command. This time the whistle came when Max the dog's 8-inch snout was about 2 inches from my upper pant leg. Max the dog had stopped, but he was still on alert. His wet nose maw slowly leaned into my pocket for a sniff. I wasn't sure if he was smelling my treats or the magic mushrooms. All I knew was that he was drooling on my foot and that my leg looked more and more like steak on a stick. Finally, Max the man gave 3 sharp whistles. Suddenly, Max the dog sat, panting with a labradoodle-friendly smile. "Good dog, Max," I said. I gently reached into my uniform's jacket pocket and gave Max the dog his Costco peanut butter dog biscuits. There was a loud crunching sound, and I was glad it wasn't my leg. Finally, my boys and I got to work. After some quick and very skillful forklifting, my crew and I loaded the solar panels while Max the man and Max the dog watched. They were making sure that the solar panels were the only things being lifted out of the warehouse. There were a lot of confiscated goodies in that same warehouse. It was filled with Italian sports cars, speedboats, boxes of toilet paper, Russian caviar, and other luxury crap that was on ice for some reason. But I wasn't tempted. Max the man might have other buyers for the other luxury goods, but that wasn't my job. All I cared about were those pallets of shrink-wrapped solar panels. It took an hour, maybe a little less, to get the trucks loaded. I gave Max the dog another treat from my pocket, and he snapped it up, drooling all over my hand. "What about my treats?" asked Max the man, standing beside Max the dog. I reached into my truck's cab and pulled out a large boot box filled with my latest crop. I opened the box and showed Max the man the baggies inside. But Max the man wanted further confirmation. He pointed to a random baggie inside. "Just give me a whiff of one of those," he said. I opened one of the baggies, broke off a mushroom, and held it out for Max the man. And that's when the night's troubles began. Max the dog thought that I was offering him another treat and snapped up the entire piece of magic mushroom that I'd been handing to Max the man for a whiff. It went down as quickly as a regular dog treat and with the same amount of slobber. "Oh, shit," I said. "Oh, shit," repeated Max the man. "Get Max the dog to a vet. Pump his stomach. It's your dog. I can't. I gotta. Mazz, I am not going to leave my post because my CPB guard dog ate a magic mushroom. Even if I could make up something about how I found it, I'd still be screwed, and that means our special transportation relationship would be screwed. Take Max to a vet. Any vet. No one who knows me. Now. Got it?" The mushrooms hadn't taken effect yet, and I didn't want to let them digest any more. "Got it." Max the man made a special whistle, and Max the dog went from being at attention to being a playful puppy dog. "That whistle? Max knows he's off the clock now. He'll go with you, but I don't know how he'll act with shrooms in him. Just get his stomach pumped and bring him back here by 5 a.m. when my shift ends." Max the man handed me a leather leash and opened up my cab door. Max the dog leaped into the front seat. "Okay, I got this. Back by 5 a.m. I told my crew to bring their trucks to Charlie's warehouse and to wait for me there. Max the man escorted us out of the port of Oakland, and then I pulled over and searched my phone for the closest emergency vet. It was 10 minutes away.
Dun, la 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 la. Dun, 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 dun. La 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 la.
I shifted the truck into gear and kept looking at Max the dog, expecting that he would turn into Cujo at any minute. It's usually pretty easy to drive an 18-wheeler down Oakland streets late at night, especially when you're driving with U.S. Customs plates and wearing the uniform. So I didn't think there was a risk to going 50 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone and powering through a yellow light. But that's when an Oakland cop seemed to disagree with me and he flashed his lights. Max the dog started whimpering. Maybe he was seeing me as another dog, or maybe he was seeing me as another dog biscuit he wanted to eat. I couldn't tell. What I did know was that I had no U.S. Customs ID or driver's license or anything except a copy of Max the man's paperwork. I pulled over and shut off my engine. There was no way to risk a police chase. I just had to play along and hope he'd let me off with a warning. The Oakland cop came up to my driver's side door and indicated for me to step outside. "What's the rush?" he asked calmly. His nameplate read Officer Paul Grazer. Before I could answer Officer Grazer, Max the dog's magical mushroom trip started, and it was a bad one. As soon as I opened the door, he bared his teeth and lunged out the window, barking madly at Officer Grazer. I got out and shut the door on Max. He kept barking and growling against the window pane. "Max, down," I said. I whistled in the same way that I heard Max the man whistle to signal that Max was off the clock, and Max the dog became a gentle puppy again, at least for 30 seconds. "What's wrong with him?" asked Officer Grazer. "He just swallowed some magic mushrooms," I wanted to say. But actually, Max had given me the perfect situation to avoid getting out my ID and opening up the back. He's doing his job, protecting me and the cargo. What's in the cargo? A load of confiscated solar panels. It's headed for shredding. They were made with Chinese forced labor. There's a law against importing that. You got your paperwork? ID? Sure do, but it's in the cab. We both looked at Max. He started growling at us, then pacing back and forth on the cab seat. Back and forth and back and forth. "Max," I said gently. Hearing my voice call his name, Max briefly returned to reality. He stopped and licked the window for a second, as cute as any golden retriever. Then he returned to being a hellhound, baring his teeth at Officer Grazer. "You know how to handle that dog?" asked Officer Grazer. "Of course I do. but he's hungry. That's why I was in a rush. I needed to drop the load and get Max to his dinner. Max the dog gnawed his teeth at the closed window, fogging it up and showing Officer Grazer how hungry he was. The fogged window made Max look even more like a horror movie special effect. "Solar panels, huh?" said Grazer. Grazer turned off his vest camera. Suddenly, Max wasn't the only person off the clock. "And you say they're going to be destroyed? That's a shame. You mind if I take a look?" "Keys are in the cab." We looked at each other, then at Max. "You looking to go solar, Officer Grazer?" "I've been thinking about it," said Officer Grazer. If I had any doubts, it was now clear to me that my already unlucky, no-good, bad day heist was about to get worse. I was about to be hijacked by a crooked Oakland cop. Max began barking again. "Well, if you want to look in the back," I said over Max's barks, "let me get you my paperwork, keys, and ID. The moment I put my foot on the cab step, Max howled and then stared directly at Officer Grazer. Grazer looked at Max, thinking if he really did want those solar panels. Then he decided he didn't. "Never mind," said Officer Grazer. "Just slow it down." Grazer turned and began walking back to his car. Relieved, I opened the cab door just a crack, intending just to slip my leg in, but Max was too agitated. 125 pounds of teeth and muscle nosed its way out of the narrow truck door opening and leaped onto the Oakland street, heading straight toward Officer Grazer. I tried Max's calming whistle, but my mouth was too dry. Only a wisp came out. All I could do was warn Grazer. "Run, you corrupt, donut-chomping fat fuck!" For a second, Grazer turned around with his hand on his gun holder. Then he saw Max heading towards him. Mushrooms are sober. Max the dog knew guns, and he was trained to bite at the hand that held one. And that's just what he did. Grazer dropped the gun. Now disarmed, Max's training told him to hold the suspect. So he went for a taste of Grazer's heel, and I heard a satisfied "Grrr." Grazer pounded his fist on Max's head and managed to kick him off, butting Max's head with the police car's door. Finally, Grazer was able to get inside his patrol car. Max stayed with him. He jumped at Grazer for another taste and gnawed at Grazer's window. Normally, I wouldn't have intervened, but I knew that Officer Grazer had turned off his camera and had just tried to hijack at least some of the truck's cargo. If I'd been a real CBB officer, that would have been a federal offense. Maybe this wasn't the first time Officer Grazer had stopped a CBB truck. I walked up to Grazer, staying calm. "He bit me! He bit me!" "Yeah, he did. Good boy, Max. And if I ever hear of an Oakland cop stopping a U.S. Customs truck on official duty again, Max and I won't be the only ones knowing about it. You understand me, Officer Grazer?" "Yes, won't happen again. I swear. Just call him off and I'll get out of here." Satisfied, I tried Max the man's whistle trick again. Max calmed down, but I knew it wouldn't last. "Come on, Max. Come on, buddy. Let's get some real dinner." I ran back to my truck and opened the cab door, but Max didn't seem to want to let Grazer go. I still had a few treats left and took out one. I waved it, but Max was in the zone. He leaped on top of the police car's hood and jumped up and down, barking and growling at Grazer. The cop was panicking now. "Stop him! Stop him! Help me! Help me!" And then I think Grazer pissed in his pants. He stopped yelling and looked down at his crotch, shocked. But that seemed to do the trick for Max the dog. He marked his territory, too, by pissing on the cop's windshield. There was a silence for 30 seconds, and then Max hopped off the hood and bolted toward me at full speed. Just before he got to me, I threw the dog treat into the cab, and Max leaped in. I jumped in next and quickly shut the door. As soon as my door slammed, Officer Grazer peeled out in a U-turn, probably heading towards a nearby urgent care center or emergency room. Since his vest camera was off, I was confident he'd report a random dog bite, not this incident. I kept up Max the man's whistling trick all the way to the vet. It seemed to calm Max down every time, turning him into a whimpering puppy dog for a minute before turning him back into an extremely mad guard dog. At the vet, I used my uniform as a cover. I told the doc that Max had found a stash of magic mushrooms and had eaten one by mistake. Thankfully, it wasn't dangerous. Max just needed a strong sedative. Whatever dreams he had after that, they must have been peaceful, because I was able to carry him back to the truck and put him into Max the Man's arms without another growl or a bark. Max the Man was happy, I was happy, and Charlie was super happy when he walked into his warehouse and saw his full shipment of solar modules. "Neighbor, you are the best," said Charlie. He took out his cell phone. In a few seconds, I got a notification confirming that I'd received our agreed payment in Bitcoin. "Any problems? You really want to know?" "No, I don't. But tell you what, I have a bonus for you. How would you like to go solo? Don't you need all these panels?" I always order extra. Even with the best quality panels, some are going to break during the shipping. And then, you never know when another project comes along. I've got plenty of extra for your place." I thought about it and looked at Charlie. He was beaming. For him, it must have seemed like I'd saved his life, or at least saved him from bankruptcy. To me, it was just another job, although this was a tough one. I almost said yes, but then I thought that maybe Charlie was buttering me up for another job. "No strings attached?" I asked. "No. As far as I'm concerned, you're out of the solar business. My project owner talked to my exporter. He does a lot of business in China, and he assured me that I'll never have this kind of shipping problem again." "Okay, sure. I'll go solar. As long as you take care of everything, why not? Who doesn't like getting free electricity?"
Boom, la 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 la. Boom, 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 la 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 la. Boom, boom.
About 6 weeks later, Charlie's solar panels had been installed by a local solar contractor he knew. It was the same person who installed the system on his roof, he said. Now our homes were twins. We started getting attention and questions from our other neighbors. Attention and questions were things that I wasn't ever looking for. But Charlie didn't mind. "How much did it cost?" they'd ask. "An arm and a leg," I'd say. That was more true than any dollar amount. But then they'd say, "Ha, seriously." And like with Charlie, I had to be neighborly, so I told them. It sounded like a good deal, and they asked me for a referral to my installer, who was really Charlie's installer. One thing led to another, and like magic, I started having a serious business relationship with Charlie's solar installer. I started becoming his #1 solar referral partner. I don't know why, but people trusted me. Other than how I got my solar panels, I had no reason to lie, so I became a very honest broker, which was new for me.
Boom, la 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 la. Oh, oh.
Eventually, I decided to make a significant investment as a silent partner with Charlie's solar installer. So that's how I got into the solar business. How I got out of the solar business, that's another story. Let's just say that Charlie and I knew the same people, and those people were the real owners of Charlie's solar project. And if I'd known that, I never would have taken the job. But like I said, that's another story, one that I can't talk about, so I won't, for now. Part 3. The Favor. Okay, let me be clear about this. I didn't know. Everything about that day was a total surprise. It was a little over a year after the solar panel heist, and I was really enjoying my life. Thanks to Charlie, I'd invested in a legit home solar business. I was minimizing my special transportation business and my special mushroom business. But can we not go there? You want to know what really happened that day? This is what happened. It started completely normal. Charlie and I walked to Phil's for our usual morning cup of muddy, rich, strong black coffee. We weren't being followed. I might have stepped back from my former career, but I would have known. Some skills you don't forget. It was just a normal Tuesday morning talking about the solar biz. How's the project going, Charlie? All good. We're about a month away from PTO. Why does solar have so many acronyms? Instead of PTO or permission to operate, why not permission to turn on, like a light switch? English. Beats me, Mazz. Ask the AHJs and PUCs. I laughed. In the last year, Charlie had taught me a lot about the solar industry. The AHJs are the authorities having jurisdiction. They're your local permitting people from the county, the fire department, the building department, who require their own special sauce of solar regulations and codes. The PUC? That stood for the Public Utility Commission. They're the state utility regulators who make the statewide solar rules and policies. By the way, I need a favor, I said. Charlie looked at me. Legit? Yes, legit. I told you. I'm shutting all that down. The solar business is good. It's going to grow for the next 30 years. I'm just having one problem right now. You need panels. Bad. I told you to stock up, Mazz. I did. Business is good. I'm out again. Come on, Charlie. You gotta know somebody. I've got 10 home projects I could start right now, but I need the panels, man. You gotta know someone. How many? Call it 1,000, I said. Mazz, you've been on the solar coaster for a year now. You know all the distributors. Why do you need my help? Because they want volume. We're doing 10 or 15 jobs a month, 7 kW to 10 kW jobs. That's nothing to them. With your utility scale buying power, just buy me a little extra, will you? You know I'm good for it. Okay, what kind of panels do you need? Thank you. 375 or 400 watt mono or better with 20% or more efficiency. 20% efficiency meant it would capture more sunlight per panel, which meant I'd need to install fewer panels. Fewer panels meant fewer trips to the roof, lower labor costs, and other costs. In other words, more power per square inch for the homeowner and more profit for me. Win-win. I'll see what I can do, Mazz. Thanks, Charlie. You're a prince. Coffee's on me. We arrived at Phil's and I was about to buy our cups of coffee when I saw Richie. He was old, nearing 70, with gray hair, wearing a suit with suspenders. Seeing Richie and his suspenders at Phil's was like entering a funeral home and seeing the deceased in the casket wearing pajamas. You know the guy, but it seemed unreal. It was inappropriate. It was out of place. This was not the place to do our kind of business. This was Rockridge, not Richmond or San Leandro. I wanted to tell him to leave, but I was with Charlie. The thing to do was to ignore him and talk on the phone later. But Charlie screwed up that plan when he shook Richie's hand. "Richard," said Charlie warmly, "I didn't know you were a Phil's fan. Who doesn't like great coffee?" Richie turned and looked at me blankly. "Richard Prout." He held out his hand and smiled. I shook. Richie may have been pushing 70, but he squeezed my hand like a rock. The kind of pressure that says, "Shut your pie hole," or else. "Massimo Botticelli," I said, "like the painter, but I just paint houses." It was my standard joke, like I was meeting Richie for the first time. He seemed to like the act and smiled as if he'd never heard it before. "Richard is the asset owner of my big solar project that I'm finishing," said Charlie. "Max is my neighbor from across the street. He's also in the solar business, but just on the residential side." "Small world," said Richie. "You two living next to each other and both in the solar business." "With the passage of the IRA, the industry's expanding fast," said Charlie. "What brings you to Rockridge, Richard?" "Oh, I was supposed to meet a friend, but he canceled at the last minute. I'm heading back to the office. I'll see you over there, Charlie. Nice to meet you, Massimo. Keep up the good solar work." "Thanks. You too." Richie picked up his paper cup of Phil's and left. "He's your project owner?" I asked Charlie calmly. "That's the one. I'm just the developer. I'm like the conductor of the solar construction orchestra. Richard's the real money man who owns the theater and collects all the money at the box office, and his tax equity financing partners too, of course." I nodded, but didn't say anything. We got our black drips and headed back. Charlie could tell I was upset about something. "What's wrong, Mazz? You think I'm going to mark up your panels?" "I wouldn't do that to you. I still owe you one for last year. Besides, we're friends." We were. A year after our solar panel heist, Charlie and I were friends. So would it be better to tell my friend that his project owner had another name? I knew him as Richie. In my world, I knew a lot of Richies. None had last names, but you had to tell them apart, so I gave them a last name. Richie Cars was a car mechanic and an international car recycler, and by that I mean he stole cars and resold them overseas. Potato, potato. Richie 3 times was a loan collector that you didn't want to see more than 2 times, because if you did see Richie 3 times, he was no longer there to collect money. You'd be lucky if he just collected a finger or 2. This Richie, Charlie's Richie, I called him Richie Dumpster. How do we know each other? Well, as you know, I'm in the trucking business. I own a few roll-off trucks. Those are the kind that pick up and drop off dumpsters. Sometimes with my trucking business, Richie Dumpster would ask me to pick up a dumpster behind a warehouse at 2 a.m. Then I would drop it off at a specific spot at one of his landfills by 3 a.m. It was an easy $10,000 NQA. Yeah, that's right. I got acronyms in my world too. NQA meant no questions asked. All dumpsters smelled bad, but these dumpsters always had a certain ripe, rotting meat stench that made me gag with every pickup. Did Charlie know about Richie's waste removal and landfill business? If he didn't, would it be best for him not to know? I had to ask. Charlie, by any chance, is your big solar project built on a landfill? Yeah. How'd you know? Landfills, brownfields, and Superfund sites are all great land for solar these days. They're near utility infrastructure, so that's great. Plus, there's a bonus 10% investment tax credit on top of the standard 30% tax credit. Richard heard about the tax benefits and put out an RFP. I won the bid. Why? I just smelled something rotten on Richard, but I couldn't quite place the smell. I looked at Charlie. Based on how we met with our panel heist, I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie knew about Richie Dumpster's other businesses. But Charlie didn't act scared. He should have been. I was. But I didn't think this was the time to tell him. First, I had to see what Richie Dumpster wanted. Maybe it was just an NQA pickup and delivery. I sure hope so. I waved to Charlie with my Phil's mug, and we parted ways to our respective homes. As soon as I walked in the door, I saw a crushed Phil's paper cup crushed under the seal of my garage door. It looked like garbage, but I knew it was a note. I tugged it out. Scrawled on the outside, it said, "Roll-off job at 1 a.m." Next to that was the address of a landfill where I had previously made Richie's dumpster deposits, and that was now the site of Charlie's big solar project. Usually Richie Dumpster contacted me through George One-Way. George's last name was One-Way because he would only call you from an unlisted number, so there was no way to call George back. If Richie was trying to meet me directly at Phil's, it meant that George One-Way was either dead or running. I wondered if Charlie and I should do the same. But giving up our lives in Oakland was a lot to throw away on an assumption. I wanted to believe that this was just a friendly job, the same as any other job with Richie, who paid on time and paid very well.
Boom, la 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 la. Boom, 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 la 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 la.
When I arrived with my truck at the solar project site, I saw that Charlie's car was parked at the office. He was either already dead or a living, breathing part of this meeting. I looked around. The solar project site was lit up with security lights. That was a good sign. If something were going down, it would have been dark. Still, that didn't mean that the site was safe. Big solar farms like this are built on flat land, but it's not like you can see across the whole plot. Sticking out of the dirt like square lollipops were rows and rows of single-access solar trackers with solar panels. Trackers are becoming standard equipment for utility solar projects because they make the solar owner, in this case Richie, more money than a fixed-tilt system. So even though the site was lit up, any dope with a scope could be hidden behind one of those solar panel tracker rows and placing a red dot on my head when I left the truck. Thinking about that, I unconsciously wiped my forehead, as if I could wipe away any sniper dot that might have been there. The only thing that came off was sweat. Finally, I stepped out of my truck's cab and knocked on the office trailer door. Charlie greeted me with a smile. Having known Charlie for a year, I knew his genuine smiles and his "we're screwed" smiles. This was the latter. "Hey, Mazz! If I knew you were coming, we could have carpooled." He opened the door wider and I stepped inside in front of him. I was hoping he could see the bulge of my 9mm Luger that was tucked in my belt behind my shirt. Richie Dumpster sat behind a desk, still wearing the same Richard Prout suit that I saw him wearing at Phil's. His gray hair was perfectly combed for business. Other than Charlie, no one else was there. That was a relief. It was another good sign that this was just a business call. A well-paid business call. "So," I said, "should I call you Richard or Richie?" "I generally prefer Richard, but old friends call me Richie. You've called me Richie, Mazz. I've never called you Massimo, so let's not be formal. Let's be friendly." "Sounds good to me." "Have a seat," said Richie. Having a seat would make it difficult to grab the gun behind my back, but I did as ordered. I didn't see a gun on Richie, but I felt like he had one. Richie folded his hands on top of the desk. This was another indication to us that he was not a threat. By now, you probably know that when Charlie had his solar import problem last year, I recommended you. Yes. Now I know. Small world. So just to clear the air, Mazz, Charlie knows that I own several other businesses, including several landfills that are all getting full of garbage and other toxins. They need to be repurposed. As Charlie may have told you, building solar projects on landfills is a very profitable business. Not only do I get the tax credits, I get a 30-year revenue stream selling the power to the utility at a fixed price. Every watt of solar power we produce, ka-ching. It's like a laundromat money machine. If you maintain it well, it runs itself, and you can collect a steady income. And this particular solar money machine is about to turn on in a month. PTO, I said. Permission to operate? Correct. So how can I help? Well, according to my records, Mazz, you have delivered 4 dumpsters to various parts of this former landfill. I know the exact coordinates of where those deliveries were made, just in case I'd ever have to move them. Richard took out a large paper ledger from his desk and opened up a bookmarked page. And now my excellent record-keeping is paying off, because a certain friend of ours named George has been arrested by the FBI. I'm told he's going to talk. And the only way George is going to reduce his sentence is if he can prove that there are cats buried under this beautiful, productive, money-making solar farm. Cats? Asked Charlie. This is about cats? It's an acronym, Charlie. It stands for Certain Awful Things. Thank you, Mazz. Yes, certain awful things. Things like green shag carpets, bell-bottom jeans, and disco balls. Many awful things get thrown away and buried in landfills. In any case, these things, these cats, are toxic. So in order to avoid a fine, I need to move them to a proper area. And that's where you come in, Mazz. I need some of your very special authorized transportation. Sure, no problem, I said. I know how to use an excavator. I could dig this up myself. What's Charlie got to do with it? Excellent question, Mazz. You see, Charlie is not only an MBA, but he's also an electrical engineer. I'm not. I only know where the cats are buried. Of all the people who are part of this solar project, Charlie's the only one I could trust to help you dig up those cats without delaying PTO or getting you electrocuted. Neither of which I want. You're welcome, Charlie said to me. I turned to Richie Dumpster. So, Richie, let me get this straight. You want me and Charlie to dig up your 4 cats by tomorrow morning and move those cats to another location. That's it. Precisely. And for this noble service, you both will receive $25,000 in Bitcoin each. Half now, half after the move. After that, you will both return to your solar day jobs. Richie. Yes, Mazz? Why should Charlie and I trust that we won't be left permanently at the new landfill where we're dropping off those old cats? Because I'm reasonable, Mazz. I have no reason not to enjoy your company in the future. I know both of you. I know your families. By gum, you two live across the street from each other. Plus, thanks to this very lucrative solar project, you both have a reason not to want to alert any authority having jurisdiction, if you know what I mean. It's just another moving job, Mazz. And because I don't want my solar project or you to be damaged, I've asked for Charlie's help. It's as simple as that. You're good with this? I asked Charlie. Sure, I'm good with this. This is one night, and then everything's back to the solar business. Right, Richard? Right, said Richie. Okay. With the blueprints and ledger in Charlie's arms, we brought the excavator to the first set of coordinates. I don't like this, Charlie. If I'd known Richie was your solar project owner, I never would have taken the special authorized transportation job. It's okay, said Charlie. Charlie, you're in denial. Richie is not a sweet old man with suspenders. Richie kills people. I know, but you heard him, Mazz. He has no reason to kill us. That he knows of. What's that supposed to mean? What? You said he has no reason to kill us that he knows of. Oh, just an expression. Forget I said it. Charlie, what do you know that you don't want me to know? But Mazz, you don't want to know, so I'm not going to tell you. Screw that. I want to know. Are you skimming off Richard? Jesus, Charlie, stop playing with me. What do me and Richard both not want to know? Give me your gun. What gun? The gun behind your back. You practically twerked it in my face, you naughty boy. I know. You were trying to protect me in case Richard shot us. I noticed these things. Thank you. But I know your temper, so give me the gun. Or don't give me the gun. Just take out the bullets, then I'll tell you. I took the 9mm out from behind my shirt, and then took out the clip. Charlie looked around, making sure we were alone. Then he looked at the blueprint. The electric cables, they're fine. You won't be electrocuted, I promise. It's night, so none of your panels are energized anyway. Plus, all the cables are above ground here. I just told Richard you might be in danger so that we could be alone. Charlie, what don't I know? Well, you don't know that I'm an informant for the FBI and that I need to get pictures of these cats. Now you know. You're the rat? Ironically, yes. I'm the rat that's going to dig up the cats. Squeak, squeak. But it's worse than that, Mazz. How could it be worse? Again, I'm only telling you because we're friends, and eventually you're going to find out anyway, so it'd be good for you to know. What? Spill it! Well, I'm not just a solar developer, and I'm not just an informant. I'm actually an undercover FBI agent. There. Then Charlie hugged me. Man, that feels good. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest, Mazz. It wasn't loaded, but I still had my 9mm. I could have cracked it over his skull and told Richie everything, but I couldn't. At least not until I learned how much Charlie knew and how fast I could get out of town without alerting Richie and the entire FBI. Part 4. The Warning. Connections are weird. How you meet people, what they do to your life, you never understand in the moment. It's only when you look back that you see if your connection screwed up your life or saved you. At that time, I wasn't sure about Charlie. There we were, me, Charlie, and an excavator in the middle of a field of solar panels at 1 o'clock in the morning. I looked around to make sure Richie hadn't followed us or set up a sniper, but it just seemed to be me and Charlie, my new FBI friend. I just couldn't believe it. FBI guys are tough. They're built, and they don't know solar engineering and environmental permitting. Charlie was built like a garden hose, long, thin, and floppy. And FBI agents, they don't go out with your wife and slurp ramen and tear up at the movies. Plus, if Charlie wasn't a real solar geek, what about Beth? Was she an undercover Fed too? Over the last year, Beth and my Pauline, they'd been like sisters. They'd do nail spas and shop at Berkeley Bowl together. Were Charlie and Beth even really married? They sure seemed like it. And what about our friendship? I went legit into the solar business because of him. Did Charlie and Beth move across the street to set me up with his Solar Heist so that I'd have to testify against Richard Prout? Before I made any fight or flight decisions, I had to know. Charlie, who the fuck are you? I just told you, Mazz. I'm the rat. Shh. Let's not talk about it here. Let's dig up our cats so that I can get pictures of the bodies, get some DNA, yada yada yada, and have my team arrest Richard Prout in the morning. Case closed. I don't believe you. What's not to believe? I don't believe you're an FBI agent, Charlie. You're a solar nerd. You slurp ramen. You tear up at movies. You think I fake tearing up at a man called Otto? Besides, there's nothing in the FBI training model that says that we can't slurp and tear up. Geez, Mazz, I thought you could have handled it. I shouldn't have told you. Yes, you should have told me. A long time ago you should have told me. Before I started my own solar business thanks to you. First, you love the solar business. Second, I stopped you from committing more felonies. You're welcome. That's not the point. If I was going to go legit, I wanted to go, legit. Not start a business and then go into the witness protection program. You won't have to, Mazz. This is so big, we're going to catch everybody involved, and all the way to the top. It's all connected. We're connected. In a good way, my friend. You'll see. But not now. We've got to dig up these cats, or else Richard might get suspicious. So please, use that big, beautiful excavator and dig. We'll talk later. Charlie pointed to the excavator's toothy yellow shovel, and I got into the cab and fired up the engine. As I dug, Charlie seemed calm, watching the hole for any signs of our buried cats. Occasionally he'd wave his hand, making sure I didn't smack one of the solar panels hanging off the tracker. They were parked horizontal, so I didn't have a lot of room to maneuver. On the ground next to the excavator were my bullets from when Charlie had told me to empty my Luger. I could load up again and probably shoot Charlie before he got too far. But if I wanted to go that route, it would be better if it looked like an accident. Then I thought, maybe I could use the excavator shovel to whack Charlie unconscious, run home, grab Pauline, and then disappear. But if Charlie really was FBI and not just an FBI rat, the feds wouldn't stop until they found me. And then again, Prout would also send his dogs after me. I had to choose a side. Two things made me lean towards Charlie. One, if he really was FBI, then Pauline and I could go into a witness protection program. Two, I liked the son of a bitch, and I didn't particularly like Richard Prout, who, let's face it, hired me to move dumpsters filled with certain awful things. So I kept digging and hoping that Charlie knew what he was doing. But when I think back on it now, I don't think he did.
Da-da-dun, la 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 la, da-da-dun, da-dun.
I dug a 10-foot hole, but there was still no sign of the buried cats. Staring down into the pit, Charlie waved me to stop, and I cut the engine. I don't think there's anything here, Mazz. You sure you got the right coordinates? Charlie checked his phone and nodded. Since the solar project was built on a landfill and we'd broken the cap, a strong rotten egg smell came out of the pit. Christ, that smells. Maybe the bodies are just composted. Charlie shined his phone's flashlight into the pit, and then we heard Richie's voice. Need some help, gentlemen? A 6'5", lanky 25-year-old wearing a Berkeley hoodie stepped out from behind one of the trackers. I knew him. I called him Richie 3 times, because you never wanted to see him more than twice. He wanted his nickname to be Richie Berkeley, because he graduated from Cal and played on the basketball team for a year. But in our world, nobody cared about where you went to college, your GPA, or your 3-pointers. All we cared about was not being maimed or shot by the shithead with the Berkeley hoodie. I saw half of a Glock G19 9mm hanging out of the kangaroo front pocket of Richie's hoodie sweatshirt. I forced a smile. Hey, Richie. Hello, Mr. Botticelli. Mr. Boston. And you are? Asked Charlie, seeing the butt of Richie's Glock. Well, Mr. Botticelli refers to me as Richie 3 times. It's a nickname I dislike, so you can just call me Richie, or Richie Berkeley. I went to school there. Impressive, said Charlie. I'm Stanford. Is Berkeley where you learned to shoot that gun? Oh no, Mr. Boston. For guns, knives, and breaking legs, I'm self-taught. It's been quite an education, but I feel like an infinite learner. Richie casually pulled out his Glock. What shall we learn today? I think I'd like to learn about bullet wounds and kneecaps. Wait, I said. I got out of the excavator, and Richie pointed the Glock at me. Get back into the excavator, Mr. Botticelli. I'm talking to Mr. Boston. Only. And I'm listening, Charlie said. As instructed by Mr. Prout, we were just trying to find some previously buried cats. Maybe you're the cat, Mr. Boston, and Mr. Botticelli just dug your grave with his excavator. So sad, said Richie. I don't understand. Richard gave us this map to pick up these cats and deliver them to another location. We have no problem with that, do we, Mazz? So why the threats? Because Mr. Prout thinks that this whole solar investment scheme has smelled as rotten as this landfill, especially since your procured solar panels got confiscated by U.S. Customs. That was my exporter. He switched the ethically manufactured panels with panels made from slave labor. That wasn't my fault, said Charlie. Maybe, but then Mr. George Dextry, Mr. Prout's messenger service, he disappeared, and he's suddenly talking to the FBI. You talked a lot to Mr. Dextry, Mr. Boston. As this project's lead developer, I talk to everyone, Richie. That's my job. So I still don't understand why I'm being threatened. Because somebody's a rat, Mr. Boston, and Mr. Prout thinks it's you. Mr. Botticelli has a history for discretion. He's never been trouble. The devil you know, as they say. Charlie held up his hands, frustrated more than scared. Okay, Richie, let me tell you what I know. I know that Richard Prout is the owner of this landfill. That's a public record. I know that capped landfills are great for building solar projects. I know that this landfill was almost full 2 years ago, and that Mr. Prout still wanted to make money. That's when I met him. Thanks to me, utilities are going to pay Mr. Prout a steady income for 30 years for every kilowatt hour this project generates. On top of that, I know that his company is going to get a bonus 20% tax credit for building the project on a brownfield near disadvantaged communities for a total 50% tax credit. Finally, I know that my solar panel exporter screwed us, and that's when Richard told me to contact Mazz to heist the solar panels out of customs. I had no idea about cats or bodies or buried dumpsters until a half hour ago. What else do you know that I don't know, Richie? Can you share, please? I'd prefer that you not school me about solar economics, Mr. Boston. Richie pointed to the Berkeley logo on his sweatshirt. What I know is that Mr. Prout says that you're the rat. He didn't cite his sources. Now, I'm going to give you an oral exam about your involvement with the FBI. If you confess quickly, I won't kill your white Beth. If you fake your answers, I will kill her, and then you two can be buried in this smelly dump together. I will allow you 2 fake answers. And now you know why we call you Richie 3 times, I said. Shut it, Mazz. Mr. Boston, would you like to confess or bullshit me 2 more times? It'll be less painful if you give me the right answers now. Charlie didn't say anything. I could tell he was thinking about a way out, but I didn't see one. Charlie, listen to me, buddy. You can deny it twice, but he will start in on you on the 3rd time. Tell him what you know. At least save Beth. I'll make sure Richie keeps his word. Richie turned the gun toward me. You can't make me do anything, Mr. Botticelli. If I feel like taking a piss on Mr. Boston's wife or slam-dunking Mr. Boston's severed head on my private basketball court, you're going to stay in the audience and watch. Or would you and Mrs. Botticelli like to become cats too? Sit down, Mr. Botticelli. I won't tell you again. I knew he meant it. I sat back down on the excavator and looked at Charlie. Fine, if you won't tell him for Beth's sake, I will. Richie, Charlie is the rat. But he's more than a rat, Richie. He's FBI. If you fire 1 shot, 10 agents are going to bust through the gates right now. Nice try, Mazz. I won't count that as Mr. Boston's first denial. Anything truthful you want to say, Mr. Boston? Beth is counting on you. I'm not FBI. I'm not the rat. I'm just a solar developer. Stop making shit up, Mazz. It's not helping me, and it won't help Beth. 1, counted Richie. Charlie was desperate. He fell to his knees in front of Richie, tearing up, his 2 hands covering his head. Please don't shoot me. Please don't shoot my wife. I'm just a solar developer. Please. 2, Mr. Boston. Be careful what you say next, or my lesson will begin by shooting your kneecap. Charlie continued crying, his face dripping with snot. This was no fucking FBI agent. I tried to think of a way to help him, but Richie was staring at me, warning me. Charlie, buddy, don't do this to Beth. Tell him what you know. Please, Charlie, for her. Okay. Oh, God. Oh, God. Charlie wiped off a long string of mucus from his nose. He was still balled up, protecting his head. Then he sat up straight, and suddenly he grabbed Richie by his knees. It was a savvy move by Charlie. Maybe he was FBI. At 6'5", Richie's arms flailed like a Ferris wheel, trying to keep his balance, and then the gun flew out of his hand without him firing. Richie fell straight down and hit the soft, muddy ground with a thwack. Immediately, he looked for the gun, which had landed 10 feet in front of the 2 of them. It became a Tough Mudder crawl and claw race for the gun. I knew I couldn't get to the Glock before one of them, but I did have the excavator. I turned it on. Richie looked over his shoulder to see me and the excavator coming towards them. He stretched his basketball player arms closer to the Glock. To slow him down, Charlie got a grip on Richie's hoodie, trying to pull him back. It was a good idea, but Richie just towed Charlie's beanpole body forward. Charlie tried to dig the tips of his feet into the mud, but they just made straight goopy lines in the dirt. The good news was that I was almost there. My plan was to crush Richie's fucking head 3 times with the shovel. But that didn't happen. When I raised the shovel, Richie saw it coming, and he knew he had one last chance. He lunged and got both his hands gripped on the clock. Then he turned over and toward me to shoot. At the same time, I let the shovel down. But instead of hitting his head like I wanted, the sawtooth shovel came down short and chopped off both of Richie's hands at the wrists while he was holding the gun. You have to know that I didn't mean to make Richie suffer like he did. I wanted to do it clean, bang, down on the head. But Mr. Berkeley was not so smart about dying peacefully. He wasn't giving up. He still wanted to fight. Charlie let go of his hoodie and stood up, but Richie, he stayed on the ground and tried to pick up the gun with his gushing bloody stubs. Almost as bad were his groans. It was like he'd lost his language. All he could do was grunt scream in agony and frustration, like a baby groaning for a toy that's just been taken away. He made that sound and kept trying to pick up the clock with his stubs, even though his severed hands were right in front of him. First, he tried to use his right stub to pick up his right hand, as if it would magnetically reattach itself. But of course, he just ended up shoving his right hand forward. Then he tried to use both his stubs to pick up the right hand, and that actually worked. He was lying on the ground and pointing the Glock at Charlie. By then, Charlie was on his feet, but he didn't flinch. Charlie knew that Richie had no way to pull the trigger. Plus, there was so much blood, Richie couldn't hold it in his hand for long, and it slipped to the ground again. And this is another reason why I couldn't believe Charlie really was an FBI agent. Even knowing that Richie was going to kill him and Beth, he was still compassionate. Richie said, "Charlie, I think you've got to let us get you to a hospital before you bleed to death." Charlie bent down and picked up Richie's right hand with the Glock and plied off the gun from the fingers. He stuffed it behind his back. "We've got to stop that bleeding, Richie. Stand up. Let me give you a... Oh, God. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't mean to." Yeah, Charlie didn't mean to say what he almost said, but before Charlie could step away holding his hand out, Richie stood up and punched Charlie in the chin with his bloody sausage wrist. If Richie had a fist, it would have been a good hit, but in this circumstance, it hurt Richie more than Charlie. Richie immediately pulled back, shaking his arm as if it had fallen asleep. Charlie moved towards him, still holding Richie's right hand. "Richie, I swear, I do want to get you and your hands to the hospital. Maybe they can..." And that's when Richie stepped back from Charlie and fell into the pit that was meant for cats. Certain awful things. He'd lost a lot of blood, but he wasn't dead yet. Lying on his back, Richie looked up at us, his handless arms twitching, and then something switched. He spoke with real words. He said, "Mr. Prout, he's nobody. Wait till you fuckheads meet the real Solar Project owner." Richie 3 times closed his eyes, twitched his elbows like a final double drum beat, and then his shoulders relaxed. Charlie went over and picked up Richie's left hand. Then he went down into the pit. Gently, he placed Richie's 2 hands next to his wrists. "Charlie," I said. "What, Mazz?" "Other way." Charlie looked back at Richie's body and realized he'd put Richie's left hand next to the right wrist and vice versa. "Damn it! Can this night get any more fucked?" The short answer, yes, it could, and it would. Part 5. The Escape. When I was a kid in Staten Island, I often heard adults say that they wished they had a normal life. What they meant was that they wished that there were never any surprises. No sudden illnesses, No moody teenagers. No constant disagreements with coworkers, bosses, or spouses. They just wanted everything to be predictable and controllable. It's all bullshit. Nobody has that kind of life. Something's always going to happen. I'm telling you this because with Richie 3 times being dead, I thought Charlie was going to pull out his FBI badge, arrest Richard Prout, and that our lives would go back to happy horseshit normal. I'd go back to my solar business, and Charlie, he'd go back on to another case and leave me alone. That didn't happen. Not even close. But I tried. First, Charlie had to get Richard Prout to cough up more information. I can't blow my cover yet, Mazz. I don't have any evidence, said Charlie. That was the point of digging up the cats and taking photos and DNA. Richard may not own this landfill, but his corporation is on the deed. If we'd found those dead bodies, then I'd have enough evidence to use as leverage. We can't tie Richard Prout to Richie yet. We have nothing. So now what? Prout probably doesn't think I survived. So we should use that to our advantage and record a conversation that shows he knows about the bodies, or at least about the buried cats, or even about the reason he sent Richie 3 times after me. So you want me to walk into his office, assuming he's still there, and have this conversation. And what are you going to do? I'll be outside, waiting for the right moment to come in. Charlie pulled out Richie's Glock from behind his belt. I had my empty Luger, but the bullets were spread in the dirt when Charlie told me to unload the clip before he told me about his FBI news. I found 2 bullets. That gave me 2 chances to shoot Richard if I needed to. When Charlie saw me picking up the bullets, he panicked. No, Mazz, you don't get it. Prout can't die. He's the key to the real owner. I can't defend myself? Of course you can defend yourself and threaten him. But if you kill him, everything that we've been working on for the past 2 years is worthless. The connections all disappear. Got it. And speaking of connections, I want to hear about the months before we met at Phil's. How long have you been setting me up? Not now, Mazz. Richard first. Then if we survive this, I'll tell you everything I can. Meaning there are things you can't tell me? Yes, for now. I've already crossed the line blowing my cover to you. Just trust me, Mazz. I'm going to protect you and Pauline. But first things first. Get Richard. After that, everything's going to go back to normal. Charlie put his hand on my shoulder and gave it a squeeze. It was like his bro hug. My pop, he used to give me a hug after a drunken smack. He was sorry, but I never knew if he was raising his hand for a hug or a whack. After tonight, I started feeling the same about Charlie's shoulder squeezes. I didn't know anymore whether our friendship was going to help me or kill me.
Dun, la, 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 la.
Charlie and I worked out a plan, and then I drove back the excavator to the solar site's trailer and cut the engine. The trailer's light was on, and I could see Richard Prout from the window holding up a cup of coffee and looking at me. His gray-haired head cocked to the side, inviting me in. I nodded. So far, so good. My iPhone's audio recording was already on. I stepped inside and left the door slightly ajar. So, said Prout, so you did what you did. Why, I haven't done anything, Mazz, except make a pot of coffee. I'm just buried in solar paperwork. How about you? Not as buried as you. We didn't find any cats, in case you're interested. I should hope not. That was just a way to keep Charlie busy until Richie arrived. Those cats were moved a long time ago. Did everything go well? Do we have to talk about it? I don't want to know the details, but I haven't heard back from Richie. You being here is a good sign of success, but it doesn't paint the complete picture. He's cleaning up. I told him that I didn't need to see his cleaning up methods, and I came back. Interesting. I haven't heard a gunshot, but I did hear some wailful tones. I'm assuming those tones were from Charlie? Like I said, I didn't want to watch. You mind telling me how you were so sure Charlie was a rat?
Yes, I do mind.
Prout walked behind his desk. I could see he wasn't armed, but going behind his desk could change that. There was a gun there somewhere. He just hadn't shown it to me yet. I had my Luger tucked behind my back, and he probably knew that, but I kept my hands to my side. You know, Richard, I am his neighbor. His wife Beth and my Pauline are best friends. We hung out a lot together, as you know. If Beth asks me questions or cops come snooping, is there a story to back you up? We were both in the solar business, so...
What I know, Mazz, is that Charlie Boston came here last night to do some paperwork. It was late, and I left. You were home with your lovely wife, Pauline. I'm sure she will confirm that, won't she?
Richard sat down on his chair behind his desk, but he didn't put his hands on the desk. There were 3 more steps to shooting me. Open the drawer, pull the gun out, and fire.
I promised you $12,500 more in Bitcoin for your troubles, didn't I? Let me make that transfer now.
Richard reached for the drawer. That was close enough. I pulled out my Luger from behind my back. Don't touch that drawer, Richard, or I'll blow your head off. You know I will. I charged at him, and Richard flinched, but kept his hands up. Charlie came in through the door, also holding Richie 3 times fully loaded Glock. So far, so good. But seeing Charlie, Richie looked shocked and, sad.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Richard said. Charlie, please don't tell me that Richie is dead.
Richard was sitting in a rolling office chair. I kicked the edge of the chair and he drifted away into the corner. Sure enough, there was a gun in his top drawer. Not his phone. He was going to ice me, and that pissed me off. I took out his gun, and Charlie held out his hand. I knew I shouldn't have, but I gave it to him. He put the safety on and slid it behind his back.
Obviously, Richie is dead, said Charlie. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Oh, dear, said Richard. He looked genuinely sad. I didn't understand why until later, but he wasn't being sad for Richie.
Where are the bodies, Richard? And how did you know that I was a Fed?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does, Richard. Cooperate, and you may spend the rest of your life in a confined cell, but with decent conditions and less violent inmates. Don't cooperate, and your prison bed will be more like a bunk bed. Are you a top or a bottom, Richard? Just shoot me now, said Richard, looking at the trailer floor. Then he raised his eyes. That's not an expression. I mean it. Shoot me, Charlie. We can't do that, Richard, said Charlie.
Mazz, look in the cabinet for some cable run ties. Tie 'em up.
Gentlemen, have you ever seen a film called A Man Called Otto? It's about a man who fails to kill himself because he becomes loved by others. This is not that picture show. I advise you to shoot me in the head right now.
You got it, I said. Richard looked straight at me and smiled, ready to die.
Mazz, don't. We need him alive. Charlie, I liked you before I found out that you were an informant, so I'm going to make this very easy for you. First, I've got $1 million in Bitcoin that can be transferred to you or Mazz or both in a matter of seconds. That is your reward for cleanly shooting me. The only condition is that you make sure that my death is very public. I want to be in the news. Dumpster and landfill mogul dies after Bitcoin robbery. Murderer still at large. That would be an excellent headline.
I'm not taking a bribe, Richard. Speak for yourself, Charlie, I said. I looked at Richard. You know my account.
Now we're talking, Mazz. I knew I could count on you. Give me my phone. It's in my desk.
Mazz, this was not the plan, Charlie said.
Fuck the plan. I'm getting $1 million in Bitcoin and getting a normal life.
Richie's phone was in his desk. Maybe he wasn't going to shoot me after all. Too late now. I gave Richard his phone, and he unlocked it with a passcode, which I memorized. Charlie would get what he wanted, and I would get what I wanted.
Mazz, I need the evidence, not money.
I glared at Charlie. Trust me, Charlie. I saw Richard open his trading app and push his thumbs into the keyboard. Then he handed his phone back to me.
There you are, Mazz. A pleasure doing business with you. Holding my Luger, I glanced at his phone and then got a notification on my own phone. It was there, $1 million in Bitcoin. Richard saw the smile on my face. Happy, Mazz? I've been straight with you. Now shoot straight into me. Do not shoot him, Mazz. Just tie him up, or I can't help you or Pauline. Charlie pointed his Glock at me. This was a new Charlie, a harder, professional Charlie that I hadn't met before. You wouldn't, I said. Mazz, don't test me. Fuck, I said. Charlie knew I couldn't shoot him, or Richard, but I still wanted the money, and Richard wanted me to have it, as long as I followed through. Jesus, holy Christ, Charlie, said Richard. I'll throw you a bone of information. It should make you understand why Mazz needs to shoot me, okay? I'm listening, Richard. Richie Berkeley, a.k.a. Richie 3 times, whoever you want to call him. We shared a first name, but he was not my son. Let us say that he was my apprentice. Perhaps guardian angel is a better word. He gets into Berkeley thanks to me, and he barely graduates thanks to me. Afterwards, his apprenticeship continued on a full-time basis. I was paid very well for my mentorship services, but Richie's real parents told me that if anything ever happened to Richie boy, that I should die very publicly, or else my wife, children, and grandchildren would die very privately and painfully. I understand, Richard. My agency can protect you and your entire family in hours. No, Charlie, you can't. You don't understand how powerful Richie's father is, and you're not going to understand before I die. So no more questions, no more answers. Richard stood up. His office chair slowly rolled back behind him and bumped into the wall. What are you doing, Richard? Asked Charlie. I'm going to count to 5. If you or Mazz don't shoot me, I will come over there, kick both your asses, shoot you, and then shoot myself. Right, said Charlie. Richard smiled. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he said, counting quicker than a kindergartner playing hide-and-seek. Then Richard bolted towards me. Don't shoot him, Mazz, said Charlie. Shoot me, Mazz, said Richard. Richard and I played Ring Around the Rosie around Richard's desk. We kept going in circles, around and switching directions, all the while Richard's trying to get my gun. Charlie stayed back, not wanting Richard to go after his gun and follow through with his murder-suicide escape plan. The 5th time around, I was out of breath. If Richard didn't drop dead of a heart attack, I would. Richard, I gasped, give Charlie the name of the real project owner, and I'll shoot you. I promise. No, you won't, said Charlie. You were supposed to shoot me for $1 million Bitcoin, Richard screamed at me. He reversed directions again, and so did I, still keeping my distance. I know, Richard, but that $1 million is worthless if Charlie's going to arrest me for shooting you. Give him a name, and then I'll shoot you, and Charlie will let me go. Right, Charlie? I can't lie. That's a little gray area, Mazz. I suppose if you were defending yourself, maybe. I'll take that chance. Tell him a name, Richard. Who's at the top? Then bang, bang, I promise. I nodded to Richard and raised my eyebrows. Richard stopped chasing me around the desk, breathing deep and considering for a second. No, he said at last. I'm not a rat. Give me that gun. Suddenly, Richard pushed his hands onto the desk, swung his legs over, and jumped me. We fell over on the ground. I was tall enough to keep the gun out of his hands, but then he started choking me. Damn it, Mazz, can't you knock him out? Said Charlie. I'm about to pass out. Shoot him. Better shoot me, Charlie. This isn't the first time I've strangled a man, Richard said. I could feel all the blood rushing to my head. I wasn't going to die for this. I pulled my arm back into reach, and I put my gun under Richard's chin. Finally, said Richard. He let go, and I could breathe again. But when I pulled the trigger, nothing came out. Richard heard the click. Lord love a duck, give me that. Richard grabbed the Luger out of my hand, pointed the gun under his chin, and tried again. But nothing. Understanding that Charlie wouldn't let me have a loaded gun, Richard threw the gun at Charlie, who batted it to the floor. "All right, Charlie, your turn." Richard stood up and rushed Charlie, who was still holding Richie's Glock, but Charlie didn't fire. "Richard, you don't have to do this. I'm not going to hurt you or let you hurt yourself. Fuck you." As Richard tried to bulldoze Charlie and grab his gun, Charlie stepped aside at the last minute like a bullfighter. Richard hit the wood-paneled wall behind him. He knocked off frame permit approvals, environmental certifications, and schedules. Turning around and out of breath, Richard made another run at Charlie. This time, when Charlie moved, Richard went with him like a curving bowling ball. The force was strong enough to knock Charlie to the ground and knock the Glock out of his hand. "Fuck," I said. I headed toward them, but not before Richard got his hand on the butt. Charlie used his right hand to redirect Richard from pointing the gun at himself or at Charlie or at me. With Charlie's left hand, he reached behind his back and pulled out the gun that was in Richard's desk. Now there were two guns pointed at Richard. He suddenly stopped struggling, looking at Charlie's Glock and his desk 9mm and impatiently waiting for one of them to go off. When none did, he shifted his grip to wrestle for his former 9mm in Charlie's left hand. But before Charlie could pull it away, Richard got his thumb into the trigger's loop and leaned his forehead in front of the muzzle, then pushed his thumb on the trigger. Finally, Richard got what he wanted. The shot opened a large hole in his head, and blood sprayed over Charlie for the second time that night. Standing over the two of them, I saw Richard fall over, and he was kind of smiling. Maybe it was the relief that his family would be safe. Maybe he was thinking about finally having a normal life. I mean, come on. Life in hell had to be more normal than all of this, right? Part 6. Trust. There are certain things people say in a casual way that always bugs me. Like when somebody says, "Bye, love you." Do you? Maybe you like me, but do you love me? Are you going to wipe my ass or feed me if I ever get Alzheimer's? The other thing I hate is trust me. People say it all the time, but they don't mean it. If you've shown me that you can be trusted, then sure, I'll trust you, now and tomorrow. But if you've already screwed me once, or we don't know each other too well, there's no reason why I should trust you, and you can say the same to me. If you know I'm a former thief, you shouldn't rely on me. I have to show you I can be trusted. That's how it was for me and Charlie. I might have thought I knew him. For a year, he was my friend, neighbor, and partner in a grand theft international solar panel heist. And then he helped me go legit and get into the solar business. Then we started hanging out together with our wives. That Charlie demonstrated trust with action, not just words. But in the last 6 hours, Charlie had just told me that he was an undercover FBI agent, and then he cleanly shot Richard Prout, a major player in a West Coast crime syndicate. And again, I had a past, and Charlie knew that. So neither of us really knew each other anymore. I had to treat him like a mysterious stranger, and he had to treat me like a criminal. That's how things were between us after Richard Prout was lying in the solar project's trailer office, blood bubbling from his forehead. I looked at Charlie, his gun still smoking. "Mazz, trust me," he said. How could I take that seriously? But I played along. "Sure, Charlie," I said. He knew I didn't mean it, but his Glock was actually loaded. Mine was empty. "I mean it, Mazz," said Charlie. "I'm going to take care of this right now. Trust me." Every time he said trust me, it irked the shit out of me. But I didn't show any annoyance. I wanted him to trust me long enough to get out of the trailer and disappear with Pauline. As if he'd read my mind, Charlie holstered his gun. "Better?" I shrugged. "Hang tight." Charlie pulled his cell phone out and hit a name. In 2 rings, someone picked up. He left it on speaker. "What's the score, Charlie?" said a woman on the other end. "No score yet. 2 men on base, 2 out," said Charlie. "Oakland needs to send in a cleanup hitter, but the game's not over yet. We've got time. I'm going to keep watching the game and see what happens." Charlie hung up. "Who the fuck was that?" I asked. "A friend. By tomorrow morning, everything is going to be cleaned up, including Richie 3 times' body and, his hands." What about me? Well, we need to talk about that. Charlie was about to do some explaining when his cell phone rang again. This time, he didn't put it on speaker, but I could see his face flinch. Understood. We're on our way. Charlie hung up. Mazz, it's Pauline and Beth. They're being watched, but not by our people. We need to make things look normal as quickly as possible. Charlie looked over his shoulder, surprised I wasn't following him. Mazz, did you hear me? Pauline and Beth are in danger. We've got to go home. That's what Charlie said, but I didn't hear the other side of that phone call. I still didn't move. Mazz, now. We'll talk on the way. Trust me. And there it was again. Charlie, my new stranger and ex-friend, asking me for my trust. If it were Richard Prout or Richie 3 times asking, I wouldn't have gone. But my old Charlie, the one I knew before that night, the one who tried to help Richie get to the hospital, he's the one that made me pick up my feet and follow him. You drive, he said. If we come back together, it'll look like we were out for late drinks. Sounds good. Getting into my Ford 150 Lightning electric pickup, I felt more like a hostage than a guy on a rescue mission. But then I remembered something. I glanced down at my driver's side door storage. Deep down, next to a solar equipment catalog, was the butt of my other 9mm. If Charlie had seen it, I just would have said to him, trust me.
Dun, la, 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 la.
Charlie, you've said trust me several times now, I said while I was driving. Okay, I'm going to play a game of 20 questions. And I'm going to boost my bullshit detector to 11, because you, sir, are an amazing liar. Fine, Mazz. Can you just drive faster, please? Remember, it's not just Beth. It's Pauline, too. Noted. Question 1. Is Beth really your wife? Charlie looked at me with no words for a long time. I almost felt like reaching my left hand down for the gun. Then he finally answered. Mazz, whatever I tell you right now is the truth, but I'm not supposed to be telling you. When we get back home, you've got to act like you still don't know anything. For your sake and my sake. You can't run or suddenly go on vacation. You can't cancel solar jobs. You can't spend Richard's $1 million in Bitcoin. Do you understand? Because if you do any of those things, Mazz, we will both be killed. Even if I go back to my old life, I'll be targeted by Richard Prout's syndicate, and so will you. Plus, my people will be looking for you too. So everything I'm going to tell you is the truth, but you've got to keep it to yourself and not talk about any of this unless you know we're alone. Deal? Deal, I said. But inside I was thinking, show me your cards first, Charlie. Then we'll see if we have a deal. There was about 10 minutes before we got home, which meant 10 minutes of questions and answers. So, the answer to question 1, Beth, she is my wife, but we work together. Okay, question 2, are you really FBI or just some kind of informant? Charlie seemed to struggle with this one, and he saw that it frustrated me. No, I was trying to keep it simple for you when I said FBI, Mazz. I am part of a U.S. government intelligence agency. It's like the FBI, a little like the CIA, but it's actually part of the Department of Energy. It's called the Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, the DOE-OIC for short. Seriously? Seriously. Look it up. Energy is politics, Mazz. I told you that the very first time we met. The spy agencies protecting our oil interests and nuclear tech secrets, that's not the FBI or CIA. That's us, the DOE-OIC. We do that. But it's a new world, Mazz. My division is focused on renewable energy and new energy. New energy is like SMRs, small modular nuclear reactors, new hydrogen technologies, gravity energy storage. The DOE-OIC informs national security decision-makers about energy threats. Then we provide scientific and technical expertise. So if your next question is, am I an engineer? Yes, I'm really a trained electrical engineer and a former solar developer. I was recruited a long time ago, so I still have my solar industry connections. The DOE-IOC. That rhymes? Okay, I'll buy it for now. Tell me more about Beth, who's now best friends with my wife. You and Pauline think she's an accountant. She is, but she's a forensic accountant. She tries to trace the money for illegal energy transactions, money laundering, stuff like that. When this assignment came up, we were the perfect couple. And what is your assignment exactly, Charlie? Mazz, if I tell you and you get caught by Richard Prout's syndicate, 5 years of investigations go down the drain. You understand that? I understand. Trust me, I said, and let that settle in. Okay, the short version is that in 2011, the Italians busted a mafia boss who was investing crime money into wind and solar projects. That was in the news. You could look that up too. At first, the Italians thought it was just a local money laundering innovation. There were lots of renewable energy incentives in Europe at that time. People were getting rich off a solar feed-in tariff. A feed-in what? A feed-in tariff. FIT for short, or some people call it the FIT. The FIT was a generous solar subsidy. It paid solar owners for every kilowatt hour of solar that they generated and sent back to the Italian grid. The bigger your solar farm, the more money you made every hour the sun shined. So follow the money, right? The mob invested, and the Italians captured this mafioso solar money launderer. But after a few months in the slammer, he talked in exchange for shortening his sentence. It turns out that he wasn't local. He was part of a much larger solar money laundering syndicate. So, a bigger mob organization. It's not quite the Cosa Nostra. It's more of an international business syndicate of drug dealers, money launderers, corrupt politicians, and rich tax cheats. Think of this syndicate like the Vatican. From the bottom up, you've got priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and the Pope. The man they caught was the Italian cardinal. His day job was being the mayor of a town on one of Italy's resort islands. The entire syndicate met there once a year to discuss the annual returns of their solar projects and where they were going to invest next. As a cardinal, he knew everyone up and down the leadership chain. Okay, so it's the Solar Vatican. Who's the Solar Pope? Great question. Our Italian solar cardinal didn't live long enough to tell us. We moved him from Rome to a nicer solitary accommodations. Somehow, he electrocuted himself by taking a bath with a hairdryer. He was bald, by the way. The day before his last bath, he gave us the name of the U.S. solar cardinal. Guess his name. Richard Prout. Right. And that's what brought me from D.C. to California 2 years ago. I thought we were going to get the Solar Pope's name through Richard. And maybe we still will by having Richard's cell phone code. You still have the passcode, right, Mazz? Yes, and I got Richie 3 times phone too. Good. So based on our conversation with Richard tonight, it looks like Richie 3 times was the Solar Pope's son. If we can figure out Richie's real identity, that could be another way to get to the top and close down the entire syndicate. So you see, I wasn't lying. This is big. And we're close to catching everyone, Mazz. Okay, makes more sense. Now tell me about me. When we met, you knew I knew Richard Prout, and then you moved across the street from me? Actually, no, Mazz. Sometimes, and you have to believe me, coincidence, fate, whatever, happens. The imported solar panels for Richard's landfill project really were confiscated by U.S. Customs, and my exporter really did screw us. I couldn't get the DOE IOC to make a special call because then Richard would get suspicious. Besides, the more he helped me with the heist, the more I'd have evidence to convict him and use it for leverage. So it really was Richard Prout who told me about your customs guy and his dog. Max the man and Max the dog. Right. And it's Max the man who said I would need your special authorized transportation and then pointed you out on my Saturday night visit. You just happened to live across the street from me. The next morning, I met you at Phil's coffee shop with my proposal, and you know the rest. And then what? What about our friendship over the last year, Charlie? You've been using me this whole time. No, not the whole time, Mazz. It's true. You being across the street, I thought you might help me uncover more evidence about Richard and maybe get to the Solar Pope. So I gave you the free solar system to keep us friendly, but not friends. I had no idea you'd ever get into the solar business. That was all you wanting a legit life. You kept coming to me for advice. And then We really did become good neighbors, solar colleagues, and friends. That's the honest truth, Mazz. If you weren't truly my friend right now, I never would have told you any of this. Now I'm trusting that you can keep all of this secret, because as far as I know, my cover is still good. I'm just Richard Prout's solar developer. If my Department of Energy team can clean up Richard and Richie at the solar site, you'll keep doing what you're doing like tonight never happened. And I'll keep doing what I'm doing, building solar projects for Richard's shell company and eventually discovering the head of his solar crime syndicate. What happens to the solar projects after you catch the syndicate? Well, after the syndicate is convicted, they'll be seized and sold at auction. But it's not just the money laundering. The syndicate is stealing intellectual property for batteries, inverters, everything, and then they're selling it to other companies in other countries. They're also buying and hoarding critical minerals like copper, lithium, and other rare earth minerals that affect the price and the construction of renewable energy projects. So what you're telling me is they're manipulating markets, commodities, that sort of thing. Right. You've helped protect the technical energy security of this country, Mazz. You're a patriot, and people besides me know that. But you can't spend that Bitcoin, Mazz. You can't do anything odd. Just be normal. When all of this is over, you're not going to spend a day in jail. You'll be a hero. Trust me. And there were those words again. Trust me. But I believe this new Charlie. He was pretty similar to the old Charlie. So I did trust him. At least I did at that point.
Dun, la, 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 la.
When we got home, I pulled into the driveway, and I didn't see any strange cars on the street. It was quiet. But this was Rockridge. It was always quiet. What do we do now? Charlie checked his phone. Well, no more messages. I don't know how they're watching us, but let's just say goodnight, go to our houses, and go to bed. Ready? I nodded and got out. Charlie waved. Good night, Mazz. Phil's coffee in the morning? Yeah, 9 o'clock. Sounds good. Charlie waved to me and went to his front door, not even looking left or right. My car door was open, and I could now clearly see my gun in the door's side bin. Taking it with me would not have looked normal, so I didn't take it. I locked up, opened up my front door, and went inside. The lights were off, but I didn't feel alone. Pauline, I'm home, I said quietly. You asleep? The lights went on in the living room. Pauline was wide awake, duct tape over her mouth, and a short, bald, sweaty man with a goatee pointing a gun at her. I knew him as George Oneway. He was Richard Prout's messenger. I have a message for you, Mazz, said George. When Richard Prout had a dumpster job for me, I got it through a call from George. The last I'd heard of George, Prout thought he was talking to the FBI and disappeared. But abracadabra, there was George right in front of me, holding a .44 Magnum to my wife's head. From Richard? Usually you just call me George, I said. I had another gun in the living room's coffee table drawer. There were more guns in each of the side tables and in the living room bar. Pauline always complained that it felt like we had the cargo pants of furniture, pockets and storage everywhere. This was why. In fact, there was at least one gun in every room. The question was, could I get to the coffee table or side table drawers before George pulled the trigger? The other thing was that George wasn't known as an enforcer. He was just a messenger service. A verbal messenger service. So I guessed he could fire his Magnum sure. 5-year-old kids do it all the time. Maybe George had even killed someone. But like me with my guns, only in self-defense. George held the gun and looked at me. Mazz, the FBI is after me. I guess you know that. And Richard knows that. I've been trying to call him, but he won't pick up. Yeah, because he's dead, I thought to myself. You call him. Tell him that I have been loyal and that I am not a rat, okay? George, you realize he's not going to pick up at 3 a.m., right? He's asleep. I'll call him in the morning, okay? Can you please lower that gun now? No, I need you to call him now and tell him now. He trusts you. He'll pick up for you. George, come on, he's an old guy. He probably doesn't even have his phone on, let alone by his bed. No, it has to be now. I've got a boat. The FBI will never find me, and I don't want him and his international syndicate friends chasing after me. I'll never betray him, Mazz, but I need to be with you when I tell him that. You'll vouch for me, and then I'm not with the FBI when I'm saying this. See, that's why I need you right now. George, he's an old man. It's 3 a.m. I don't care what time it is. Just do it. George pressed the magnum to Pauline's head. Okay, just lower it and I'll try. But if he doesn't pick up, that's not my problem. Got it? You can record something with me on video and I'll send it to him later. Okay, that's a good idea, but first try him. I pulled out my phone, feeling good that we'd worked something out. Of course, Richard Prout wasn't going to pick up for George or anyone's phone call in hell. All I had to do was make the call. So I did. No sweat. And then I did sweat, because as soon as I pressed Richard's name, his phone rang from my pocket. George looked confused, and then he wasn't confused. I saw the look on his face. It was the same look that I must have had when I learned Charlie was FBI or DOE or whatever. George had trusted me. I had betrayed him. And now he was pissed. Of course, George didn't kill me. You know that, or I wouldn't be here telling you all this. You mind if we stop the recorder and take a break? I'll pick it up from here next time. I'm sorry to leave you with a cliffhanger, but rest assured we will be returning with the Solar Heist, or How I Got Into the Solar Business in Season 3. That's coming up in a couple of months, maybe sooner. Don't forget to check out the true solar takeaways in the show notes. That's in every episode, and it separates the solar fiction from the solar facts. One more thing before we go. I've just created a merch store. What's a merch store? It's really just a t-shirt store for all of you who love a good solar story and want to wear it on your chest. Just click on the merch button on probablytruesolar.com, and if you do, you might find a 10% discount code. If you like this long episode, or even the short ones, please remember to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That really helps others to find the show. The Solar Heist, or How I Got Into the Solar Business, was written and read by Tor Solarfred Valenza. Probably True Solar Stories is a production of Unthink Solar, PR and Communications. Be bold for solar, stand out and educate. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another fresh season of Probably True Solar Stories. Take care.